Hey everyone, welcome to the show.
Yeah.
Ever get that feeling like you're searching for something, but you can't quite figure out what it is?
Yeah.
Like you're a puzzle piece, but you just don't fit anywhere.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean.
That's the vibe I get from Taipei at Daybreak, the
Yeah.
book we're diving into today.
Yeah, it really captures that feeling of alienation, that not belonging.
And what's so interesting is how the author, Brian Heil, connects this personal struggle with like the whole political situation in Taiwan.
Absolutely. It's a place also trying to figure out its identity, its independence.
Exactly. Our main character is this Taiwanese American activist, but, and get this, this is not your typical, rah-rah activist
Yeah,
story.
not at all.
We're going on a journey across three cities, actually.
Yeah.
New York, Tokyo, and Taipei.
Each one kind of shaping how he sees himself.
His relationship with activism and that big question, what does it even mean to belong?
Right. And through all that, we're going to explore some heavy stuff. Disillusionment with social movements, finding meaning when the world feels kind of meaningless.
And that constant back and forth, between what we want as individuals and like doing things for the greater good.
Yeah, the collective action.
Okay, so let's break this down. The story starts with the protagonist's childhood. Even back then, you see this emptiness starting to creep in.
Interesting.
He was one of the only Asian kids in his town, and that outsider feeling, it sticks with him, even into adulthood.
Makes sense. It's like that experience leaves a kind of hole inside, something he's constantly trying to fill.
Through all sorts of things, right?
Right.
Activism, relationships, even some risky encounters.
Oh, absolutely. Like his time with Occupy Wall Street, it wasn't just about the cause. It was about feeling connected, finding a purpose.
And that search for connection, it leads him to some pretty complicated relationships, like with his best friend David, who's an artist really into Eastern spirituality, and of course, their mutual love interest, Aioi.
Aioi. She's a performance artist with a pretty unique way of seeing the world.
Aioi is definitely a character.
Oh, for sure. And her involvement with, the Anshin Rikyo cult, and then the protagonist's own encounter with the cult leader, it's intense.
Seriously intense. It makes you think about how far people go to find meaning, to belong somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they're drawn to these fringe groups because they feel like they don't fit in the boxes society makes.
Right, right.
And this feeling, it gets even stronger when he goes back to Taiwan. You'd think you'd feel at home,
Right. I would think so, yeah.
but it's actually the opposite.
It's a common thing, for people who go back to their ancestral homes after years away. They're stuck between two worlds, never fully fitting in either.
And for our protagonist, it's even harder because he doesn't speak Mandarin that well, and he has trouble connecting with the local culture.
I see.
Even where he lives shows how trapped he feels.
Yeah.
He's in this tiny apartment in Taipei, no windows, and it really becomes a metaphor.
Oh,
It's like Taiwan itself, feeling suffocated by these outside forces.
powerful imagery.
So he starts exploring Taipei at night, going to the less respectable parts of the city.
Oh,
And he's drawn to the people he meets, the gangsters, the sex workers, the people working the night shift at convenience stores.
interesting. It's like he finds some kind of comfort in those places, with those people, the people outside the norm.
Totally. It's like they all share this feeling of being different, of being outsiders, searching for something.
For their place.
Exactly. And this is all happening right before the 2014 Sunflower Movement, which was a huge turning point, not just for him, but for Taiwan's political scene, too.
Big moment in history. So we left off with our guy, kind of lost in Taipei, feeling like a stranger in, well, his own ancestral home. And now things are about to get really, really interesting. We're hitting a turning point, a moment where his personal struggles crash right into Taiwan's political scene, the 2014 Sunflower Movement.
Yeah, this was huge, right? Way bigger than just some trade deal with China. This was about Taiwan's identity, their whole future.
Absolutely. Imagine that feeling, watching your home, your culture, everything you know, slowly disappearing, being taken over. That fear, it was everywhere during the movement.
For a lot of Taiwanese people, this wasn't just about economics, it was about survival. Like their democracy, their identity being wiped out.
Exactly. And for our protagonist, this movement, it becomes an outlet, a way to deal with all that frustration, all that alienation he's feeling.
Oh, totally. And remember that cramped apartment, the one with no windows? Well, suddenly it takes on this whole new meaning.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not just his apartment anymore, it's Taiwan itself.
Yeah.
Trapped, suffocated.
Wow, that's a great point. The personal and the political, they're all mixed up now. And as he gets more involved in the movement, we see him come alive, like really come alive.
He gets swept up in all of it.
Yeah.
The protests, the occupation of the legislature, thousands of people all fighting for the same thing.
And in all that chaos, he finally feels like he belongs, even if it's just for a little while.
And the sources we looked at, they really capture how intense it was. All that adrenaline, the fear, but also the hope. This constant push and pull with the authorities.
It was chaotic, exciting, and, let's be honest, pretty terrifying at times.
There's this one event that really sticks out. The attempt to take over the executive yuan, the government headquarters. Remember how we talked about our protagonist, how he's drawn to risk, to pushing the limits?
Yeah.
Well, this is where it all comes to a head. He and his group, they decide to storm the building, even though they're totally outnumbered.
Bold move. Maybe a little reckless, even. But it shows how desperate they were, how urgent they felt things were.
They were ready to put everything on the line.
And the sources, they describe it like a war zone, people getting hurt, the police pushing back, just chaos everywhere.
But even though they didn't manage to take over the building, this attempt, it changed things.
Oh, absolutely. It sparked a whole debate, about tactics, about how far is too far when it comes to peaceful protest.
Some people thought it was reckless and pointless. Others saw it as like a necessary step.
And our guy, he's right in the middle of it all. At first, he's totally energized by the movement, by the fight. But as things get more intense, we start to see those cracks in his idealism.
Yeah, the reality of activism sets in.
The compromises, the infighting, the way the media twists everything.
And he starts to wonder, can you really change anything within the system?
The disillusionment creeps in. It happens to a lot of people who get involved in social movements. That initial hope, that energy, it fades. And what's left is this harsh reality.
And for him, this disillusionment, it feeds right back into those personal struggles he's already dealing with.
He's lost, unsure of himself. And now he's questioning the things that used to give his life meaning.
It's a tough spot to be in, especially for someone who already doubts himself so much.
So what happens next? How does he deal with this growing feeling of emptiness? We'll find out in part 3, where we'll dig into the aftermath of the Sunflower Movement and see how our protagonist searches for meaning in a world that's, becoming more and more uncertain.
So we left off with our protagonist, kind of disillusioned after the Sunflower Movement, not really sure where he fits in anymore. He wants to find a new way to use his energy, make a difference. Yeah. And that's where Daybreak comes in.
Yeah, Daybreak, this online publication, he co-founds it, and it becomes his new platform, his way to give Taiwan a voice, on a global scale. But even this project, something that started with such hope, it gets tangled up in those same issues of identity and belonging that he's been struggling with personally.
Right from the start, there's tension at Daybreak. He wants it to be this platform for authentic Taiwanese voices, but his co-founder, Neil, who's American, well, he seems to have a different vision.
Almost like Neil's looking at Taiwan through an American lens. He cares about its strategic importance, like how it relates to China, more than focusing on its own culture, its own identity. And this clash, it really fuels our protagonist's own inner conflict, right? Remember, he's already grappling with being Taiwanese American, feeling like he doesn't fully belong on either side.
And then you have Yuli, the other co-founder. She seems to gravitate towards Neil. And it leaves our protagonist feeling even more isolated. And this was supposed to be about connection, a shared purpose.
His relationship with Yuli, it's interesting because it reflects this bigger theme we see throughout the book, how hard it is to actually connect with people, on a real level. He's great at observing, analyzing people, but he rarely lets anyone in, lets himself be vulnerable. It's like he's built these walls around himself to avoid getting hurt.
Yeah, and that emotional distance. It's really obvious in his romantic relationships, too. Like the way he talks about his girlfriend, Chidi. It's almost like she's a character in one of his articles, not a real person with feelings and complexities.
You're right. There's this detachment there. He even admits to acting a certain way to keep the relationship going, which makes you think, is he even really invested? It's almost like he's afraid of getting too close, of letting someone truly see him.
So as Daybreak starts to take off, his personal struggles, they get even more intertwined with the publication. He starts resenting Neil, convinced that Neil's just using Daybreak to boost his own career with an eye on maybe even moving to China.
And this suspicion, it's interesting because it shows how cynical our protagonist has become, how quick he is to project his own insecurities onto others. It's almost like he can't believe in Neil's sincerity because he doesn't believe in himself.
And all this resentment, it boils over in a pretty shocking way.
Yeah.
He actually attacks Neil out of nowhere.
Yeah, it's a powerful moment. All that anger, all that pain he's been carrying around, it just explodes. It shatters that image of control he's built for himself.
It also ruins his relationship with Yuli. Stuck between the two of them, she decides to distance herself from the whole mess.
And that leaves our protagonist even more alone, feeling like a failure, both personally and professionally. He's lost his friends, his sense of purpose, even his platform to make a difference.
But Daybreak keeps going, even without Neil and Yuli. And the protagonist, he buries himself in work, becomes even more driven, more demanding. But there's this emptiness underneath it all, this sense that he's just going through the motions.
He describes himself as a living corpse, constantly around people, but never really connecting. And it's sad because you can see how badly he wants to find meaning, find a purpose, but he doesn't know how.
And then in 2015, he's drawn back to Taiwan, this time by the anti-curriculum protests. And during this time, he reconnects with Ray, a childhood friend who becomes really important, both to him personally and to Daybreak.
Ray's so different from our protagonist. She's open, vulnerable, willing to embrace the messiness of life, of relationships. And her presence, it forces him to confront his own emotional walls, his own detachment.
Their dynamic, it's really tested during the protest. They're both covering the events for Daybreak, but they're also dealing with their own issues, their own search for connection in a world that can feel pretty cold and uncaring.
One of the most powerful moments is his encounter with the Gray Wolf, this former gangster turned pro-China politician. He describes having this dark thought, like a fleeting urge to kill him, and it shows you how deeply troubled he is.
It's a disturbing look into the potential for violence inside him, a violence that's born from frustration, from disillusionment, from feeling powerless.
And as the protests go on, he's forced to face these uncomfortable truths about himself. His own desire for power, his own self-destructive tendencies.
He even wonders if his activism, if it's really about making a difference, or if it's just another way to escape the emptiness he feels.
Taipei at Daybreak, it doesn't give you easy answers, nice resolutions. It ends with the protagonist still struggling, still searching for meaning and connection in a world that feels chaotic and broken.
It's a really powerful story, one that makes you think about your own motivations, your own relationships, your own place in the world. What stood out to you in this journey? What resonated with you the most? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the books and ideas that help us understand ourselves and the world around us.